So get this right. Imagine stumbling upon like secret diaries that reveal this super close connection between some English aristocrat and Adolf Hitler.
Wow.
Right. It's like a real historical mystery taking us, right into the heart of the Nazi regime. We're diving into the diaries of Unity Mitford.
Oh, okay.
She was sometimes called Hitler's English bride.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And these diaries were hidden for like 80 years.
Crazy.
And they're giving us this totally new look at her life and her relationship with Hitler. Imagine 139 encounters between 1935 and 1939.
That's a lot, yeah.
That's a pretty significant period.
It is. To have access to such a personal account from that period, especially from someone who was part of Hitler's inner circle, is it's an incredible find. It really allows us to kind of like question traditional historical narratives and approach history with a new perspective, like a more personal one.
It's pretty amazing. So at the beginning of the diaries, back in 1935, Unity is like this young woman totally infatuated with Hitler. She decides to ditch London and move to Germany to be closer to him. She starts as like almost an obsessed stalker, but then she becomes something more.
Really?
Yeah. She even describes herself in the diaries as like an intimate confidant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So what are we actually reading in these diaries? What's in there?
Well, in the diaries, Unity describes their first meeting.
Okay.
And she portrays Hitler as kind of awkward.
Awkward Hitler.
Yeah, almost like a teenager in love. It's this image that contrasts so strongly with his public persona, the austere, the severe Führer, right?
Yep.
It's a small detail, but it really helps us understand how these diaries can offer a different perspective, like a more human, personal one.
Wow. That's fascinating. It makes you wonder what she thought about this man, his charisma, his power. But I guess the big question is, what would drive a young English aristocrat to connect with Hitler in that way?
Yeah. That is the big question. And it's a complex one. We have to consider, the political climate of the time. Europe was on the verge of another war, and fascism was rapidly spreading. Many were drawn to nationalist rhetoric, the promise of a glorious future.
Right.
And then, of course, there were Unity's personal beliefs. We can't forget that she came from an aristocratic family with fascist sympathies.
Right.
And finally, we can't rule out psychological factors. The appeal of a powerful authoritarian figure like Hitler could have had, deep roots in her personality.
It's safe to say her diaries don't just describe some, like, teenage crush, right?
Sadly, no. A dark and disturbing side also emerges from the diaries. Unity, she shared Hitler's hatred of Jews.
Right.
This is something we cannot ignore, but we must contextualize it historically without ever justifying or downplaying the danger of these ideologies.
Yeah, it's crucial to remember the tragedy of the Holocaust and the horror of Nazi ideology. But speaking of mysteries, some people believe that Unity's relationship with Hitler went beyond just friendship.
Right. There have been speculations about possible romantic relationships between Unity and Hitler or other Nazi officials, but there's no concrete evidence to support these theories. The diaries themselves don't offer any definitive answers on that.
Another thing that struck me was the final entry in the diary. It's dated September 3, 1939, the day World War II began.
Yeah.
It kind of marks a breaking point for Unity as well.
Exactly. Unity's reaction to the outbreak of war was drastic. She was devastated by the conflict between her home country, England, and Nazi Germany. She attempted suicide.
Oh, wow.
She shot herself in the head.
It's an extreme act that shows just how deeply the war shattered her life and her world.
It does.
Unity survived the suicide attempt, but she suffered lasting damage. She eventually passed away in 1948 at just 33 years old.
Unity Mitford's story really makes us think about the complexity of human experience within history. It shows us how personal accounts can enrich our understanding of the past, offering new perspectives and nuances.
Absolutely. It invites us to look beyond the surface of events and ask ourselves about individual motivations, about the choices made during those crucial moments in history. It's an invitation to remember, to study, to reflect. What do you think? How do you interpret Unity's actions in light of what we've discovered?
Well, I think